Imagine taking a torch to your most sacred beliefs, not in a fit of madness but as the first act of true clarity. To watch the comforting lies burn, to stand in the cold ashes of what you once held dear. This is not destruction. It is the clearing of the ground. For on this scorched earth we will build a fortress of logic so absolute, it cannot be conquered. The price is everything you think you are. The reward is everything you could be. You have been given a map of the world. Not by choice but by inheritance. This map was drawn for you by your parents, your teachers, your culture. It is a beautiful map, filled with lands named justice, fairness, and merit. It tells you that good intentions pave the roads to success, that loyalty will always be reciprocated, and that truth by its very nature must prevail. This map is a masterpiece of cartography. There is only one problem. It does not represent the world that exists. Inside your mind, you have built a sanctuary based on this fraudulent map, a glorious cathedral of the self, constructed from the most fragile materials known to man: hope, vanity, and the desperate need to be seen as good. Every pillar is a comforting belief. Every altar is a monument to your own perceived virtue. You pray in this sanctuary, you take shelter in it from the harshness of reality, and you believe its walls are stone. They are, in fact, sand. This inner sanctuary is the most dangerous prison ever conceived, for its bars are invisible and its warden is your own ego. It limits your field of action. You hesitate to make a difficult but necessary decision because it would crack the stained glass window of your self-image as a kind person. You refuse to see the treachery in an ally because acknowledging it would mean admitting your own judgment was flawed, which would destabilize the foundation of your vanity. You cling to a failing strategy because the hope of its success is a more comforting prayer than the cold litany of facts. You walk through the world not as a strategist, but as a curator of your own internal museum. Your primary objective is not to win, but to preserve the artifacts of your own righteousness, and so you become predictable. Your enemies, those who operate using a true map of the world, can read your movements with perfect clarity. They know you will choose the honorable path, even when it leads off a cliff. They know you will trust the untrustworthy, because the alternative is too painful for your ego to accept. They know you will sacrifice victory to maintain the illusion of virtue. Your beautiful sanctuary is not a fortress. It is a cage, and its predictable layout makes you the easiest of prey. You believe you are navigating the world, when in reality you are merely pacing within the beautiful, self-imposed confines of a lie. Enter the philosophy of Machiavelli. He is not a spiritual guide who will help you decorate your sanctuary. He is a demolitions expert who hands you the torch and the hammer. His first and most brutal lesson in developing ice-cold logic is this: to build a mind that can conquer reality, you must first become an enemy to the mind you currently possess. Logic, in the Machiavellian sense, is not something you add to your character like a new coat of paint. It is what remains when everything else has been stripped away. It is the bedrock revealed only after the cathedral of sand has been washed away by the tide of ruthless self-examination. Machiavelli wrote that a prince, to maintain his state, is often forced to act contrary to faith, contrary to charity, contrary to humanity, contrary to religion. Chas, to build the state of your own mind, you must first learn to act contrary to your own most cherished comforts. The first evil you must learn to embrace is the evil of objective self-assessment. You must look upon your own beliefs not as a loving father, but as a rival prince looking for a weakness to exploit. Take a belief you hold dear. Hard work is always rewarded. As a friend to yourself, you cherish this. It motivates you. As an enemy, you must attack it. Where is the evidence? How many hard-working men die in poverty? How many indolent men born to privilege thrive? Is it the work that is rewarded, or the strategic position of the worker? Does this belief serve you as a tool, or does it blind you to the necessity of political maneuvering and seizing opportunity? This is the process. You must place every single belief, every moral instinct, every emotional reaction on an anvil, and strike it with the hammer of a single merciless question. Is this useful? Not, is this right? Not, is this noble? Not, does this make me feel good? Only, does this serve the acquisition and maintenance of my objective? This is the first act of intellectual cruelty, and it is directed entirely at yourself. It is the recognition that your feelings are not a reliable guide. Your emotions are data, yes, but they are often corrupted data, signals from an old and faulty map. They are the echoes of the priests who designed your sanctuary, not the reports of scouts from the front lines of reality. To be ruled by them is to cede command of your own mind to the ghosts of your own conditioning. The strategist, the prince of his own mind, listens to these signals, analyzes them for information about himself and others, and then discards their counsel in favor of cold, hard calculation. This is the first brutal step, to learn that the foundations of power are laid upon the rubble of comforting illusions. The world does not reward the pure, it is conquered by the clear-eyed. If you are ready to see reality as it is, comment, "The illusion is broken," and subscribe. For in our next lesson, we will begin to forge the tools from the wreckage. The ground is clear. The smoke has settled over the ruins of your former self. Standing in this desolate quiet, the average man would feel a profound sense of loss. He would scramble to rebuild the same fragile structures, using the same flawed blueprints. But you are not the average man. This emptiness is not a void, it is a crucible. This silence is not an absence. It is the moment before the hammer strikes the steel. We have not come this far to rebuild a sanctuary. We have come to forge a fortress, and a fortress cannot be built with bare hands. It requires instruments of a different order, instruments not of faith, but of function, not of morality, but of mechanics. The first tool you carried was a moral compass. Its needle, magnetized by inherited ideals and social expectation, spun erratically. It pointed towards abstractions like honor one moment and compassion the next. It was a device designed to make you a compliant part of a larger system, to make you predictable and thus manageable. In a crisis, when clarity was paramount, its needle would tremble violently, caught between the impossible poles of doing what was right and what was necessary. That tool was the first to be melted in the fire. From its molten ruin, we forge the first instrument of the strategist, the compass of necessity. This new compass is a brutalist piece of engineering. It has no cardinal directions. It is unconcerned with the magnetic pull of societal good or evil. Its face has only 2 points etched into its cold surface, your present position and your ultimate objective. The needle that spans them is not a delicate, wavering sliver of metal. It is a thick, unyielding iron spike. It does not suggest a path, it dictates one, and its logic is absolute. When you consult this compass, it answers not the question, "What should I do?" but the far more potent question, "What must be done?" To understand necessity is to liberate yourself from the paralysis of choice. The idealist sees 1,000 different paths, each weighed down by moral consequence and the judgment of others. The strategist sees only one. The path dictated by necessity may be steep, it may be shadowed, it may require you to travel through lands your old map marked as forbidden. It makes no difference. Necessity is the gravity of power. It is the fundamental force that governs outcomes. To argue with it is to argue with the tide. To align with it is to harness the current of reality itself. Consider a general whose army is starving. The moralist would debate the ethics of raiding a neutral village's granary. He would weigh the suffering of his men against the rights of the villagers. He would convene councils. He would pray for a sign, and while he deliberated, his army would starve, his campaign would fail, and his nation would fall. The strategist consults the compass of necessity. The objective is victory. A victorious army is a fed army. The granary must be seized. The action is not born of malice, but of an ice-cold syllogism. The emotional and ethical fallout can be managed later, and it can only be managed from a position of strength, a position that would be forfeit without the necessary act. Necessity is the supreme arbiter, and its decrees are non-negotiable. Now that you have an instrument for direction, you require another for navigating the world. To display this cold, unyielding logic to others would be strategic suicide. To speak openly of necessity, to expose the inner workings of your calculations, is to invite fear, mistrust, and organized opposition. Men are terrified of the mind they cannot read, of the motive they cannot appeal to with sentiment. A visible intellect is a visible threat. Therefore, the second instrument we forge is the cloak of virtuous dissimulation. This is perhaps the most misunderstood of all Machiavellian tools. The simpleton calls it hypocrisy. The strategist understands it as armor. The cloak is woven from the very threads of the virtues you have learned to discard as internal guides: mercy, faith, compassion, integrity, piety. As internal principles, they are liabilities. As an external performance, they are your single greatest weapon. Machiavelli observed that men in general judge more by the eyes than by the hands. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. Your reality is the cold engine of your mind. Your appearance must be the warm glow of a hearth. You do not lie. Lying is the clumsy tactic of the desperate. You perform. You cultivate a reputation with the same deliberate care that a master artisan takes with his work. Each public act, each spoken word, is a brushstroke on the canvas of your public perception. You perform an act of public generosity not because you feel charitable, but because the reputation for generosity will make a future, necessary act of ruthlessness appear as an agonizing, uncharacteristic exception. You speak of honor and loyalty, not because you are bound by them, but because men will flock to a banner they believe to be honorable. This cloak allows you to move through the world unmolested. It disarms your rivals, who will underestimate you as a soft-hearted idealist. It reassures your allies, who will trust your motives even when they do not understand your actions. It pacifies the masses, who would rather be governed by a man who appears virtuous than by one who is merely effective. Beneath this cloak, shielded from the prying eyes of the world, the compass of necessity can do its work unimpeded. The logic remains pure, untouched by the need for public approval. You now have direction, and you have a shield. But the terrain you must cross is the most treacherous of all, human nature itself. To navigate it, you need a final instrument, one of measurement and prediction. You need the calculus of human resentment. The idealist believes man is a rational creature who can be persuaded by logic and inspired by noble ideals. Machiavelli knew the truth. Man is a creature of passion, governed by two primal forces, greed and fear. To build any lasting structure, you must understand these foundations. The calculus of human resentment is not a complex equation, but a simple, brutal ledger for understanding the emotional consequences of your actions. Its first principle is the economy of cruelty. Not all harsh acts are created equal. A cruelty that is ill-used is administered in small, repeated doses. It is the slow poison of nagging injustices, minor humiliations, and prolonged uncertainty. This method does not pacify. It cultivates a deep, personal, and patient hatred in its victims. It is the surest way to manufacture your own assassins. A cruelty that is well used, however, is like a lightning strike. It is swift, total, and inflicted all at once to secure a necessary outcome. The shock is immense, but it is singular. The pain is acute, but it is over. The survivors are left not with a simmering resentment, but with a newfound and profound respect for the terrible power they have witnessed. The memory of the event serves as a permanent warning, ensuring future stability without the need for further violence. One creates a vendetta, the other creates order. The second principle is the asymmetry of gratitude and injury. Benefits, Machiavelli notes, should be conferred little by little so that they may be better appreciated. Human gratitude is a shallow reservoir. It empties quickly. A single grand gesture of generosity is soon forgotten and becomes an expectation. But a series of small calculated benefits keeps the recipient in a state of hopeful dependence. Injuries, on the other hand, must be inflicted all at once. For men forget the death of their father more easily than the loss of their inheritance. An offense against a man's property, or more importantly his pride, is a debt that is never forgiven. The calculus teaches you to be a miser with injury and a measured dispenser of favor. It teaches you to analyze every decision through this lens. Which action creates a fleeting gratitude and which creates a permanent blood feud? The logical mind does not seek to be loved or hated. It seeks to produce the specific emotional state in others that best serves its long-term objective. These, then, are the first three instruments from the forge: the compass of necessity, to chart your true course; the cloak of virtuous dissimulation, to conceal your movements; and the calculus of human resentment, to master the perilous landscape of the human heart. With these tools in hand, you are no longer a wanderer lost in a fantasy. You are an architect of your own reality, equipped at last to begin the great work of construction. You stand equipped. The compass of necessity hangs at your side, its iron needle silent and steady. The cloak of dissimulation rests on your shoulders, a light but impenetrable shield. The calculus of resentment is etched into your memory, a new instinct. But tools are meaningless without a blueprint, and instruments are useless without a grand design. We are now past the age of demolition and forging. The work of architecture begins, and the first principle of this new science is a perceptual shift so profound it will forever alter your relationship with the world. You must cease to see the world as a home in which you live. You must begin to see it as a quarry from which you build. This is the external war. It is a campaign waged not with armies, but with perspective. The strategist's mind does not interact with the world. It assesses it for raw material. People, events, traditions, emotions, institutions, these are no longer elements of a shared human drama. They are stone, timber, clay, and iron. Your task is to discern their properties, their tensile strength, their breaking points, their utility to your structure. An ally is not a friend. He is a lever, useful for moving an object that your own strength cannot. Your relationship is defined not by affection, but by the position of the fulcrum. When his utility ceases, the arrangement is re-evaluated. A rival is not a villain. She is a necessary stress test, revealing the hidden weaknesses in your own design. Her attacks are not insults to be taken personally. They are invaluable data on your structural integrity. You do not hate the storm that batters your walls. You thank it for showing you where the mortar is weak. This perspective demands a supreme emotional detachment. You do not grow angry at a block of granite for being difficult to cut. You simply acquire a sharper chisel. You do not feel betrayed by a wooden beam that rots from within. You identify the decay, replace it with steel, and learn to recognize the signs of infestation earlier next time. The emotional lexicon of the common man, betrayal, disappointment, loyalty, affection, is a language of entanglement. The strategist speaks only the language of function. By seeing the world as raw material, you drain it of its power to wound you. You are no longer a participant in its chaotic dramas, buffeted by the passions of others. You are the architect standing apart, viewing the entire landscape as a collection of assets and liabilities. Your mind becomes a citadel, and from its highest window you observe the world with the cool, appraising gaze of a master builder. Every great structure begins with its foundation. If the foundation is laid on shifting sand, the most magnificent edifice will inevitably collapse. The architect of the mind has a choice of two materials upon which to build his power: the love of others or their fear. Your old self, the curator of the inner sanctuary, would have chosen love without hesitation. Love feels noble, it feels righteous, but love is sand. It is a granular, unstable foundation, wholly dependent on the goodwill and fickle gratitude of others. To build on love is to make your entire structure reliant on something you do not control. It makes you a supplicant, constantly laboring to earn and maintain the affection of those you seek to command. Gratitude is a fleeting currency, easily spent and rarely replenished. One unpopular but necessary decision, one perceived slight, and the foundation of love begins to erode. The strategist, therefore, rejects this treacherous material. He chooses to build on bedrock. He chooses to build on granite. And the granite of human nature is fear. Not the brutish, hysterical terror inspired by a tyrant. That is a volatile and explosive force. The fear we speak of is something colder, heavier, and far more stable. It is the unwavering, rational respect for consequence. It is the absolute certainty in the minds of others that your actions have weight, that your promises are bonds, and that your threats are prophecies. Love is a gift they can choose to withdraw. This fear, this profound respect for your power, is a condition you impose. Its source is not your unpredictable moods, but your predictable resolve. This foundation is secure because it rests upon the only truly reliable element of the human character: self-interest. A man will betray a leader he loves the moment it becomes profitable to do so. The bond of affection is a fragile thing when weighed against personal gain. But a man will hesitate for a very long time before betraying a leader whose response is guaranteed to be swift, decisive, and ruinous to his own ambitions. The foundation of fear does not rely on their virtue. It relies on their calculation. You are engineering their self-preservation to align with your own. By making the consequences of opposition greater than any possible reward, you build a structure of compliance that is self-reinforcing. It is not a prison they resent, but a law of nature they learn not to violate. With the foundation secure upon the bedrock of calculated consequence, we raise the walls. The purpose of a fortress wall is twofold. It is, of course, a defensive barrier, but just as importantly, it is an observation platform. Its height provides a commanding view of the surrounding landscape, allowing the watcher to see threats long before they reach the gate. These are the walls of foresight, and they are the most difficult and crucial part of the mental architecture. To build them is to abandon the practice of living in the present. The strategist must become a permanent resident of the future. Machiavelli admonished that a prince should have no other object nor any other thought, nor take anything else for his art but war. Even in times of peace, he must be constantly training, planning, and simulating conflict. For the architect of the mind, this war is the relentless practice of prediction. You must build your walls stone by constantly asking, "And what then?" Your chief deputy is loyal today. But what if a rival offers him a greater prize? What is your contingency? You have already played this scenario out in your mind. You have already identified his price, his weakness, and the precise lever to pull to ensure his loyalty remains the more profitable option. A new technology emerges that could disrupt your industry. The average mind reacts with surprise when the disruption occurs. You, from atop your walls, saw its potential a year ago. You have already analyzed its trajectory, co-opted its pioneers, or developed a counter-strategy. Building these walls is an exercise in applied paranoia. You must become the greatest enemy to your own plans. You must attack your own strategies with more vigor than any rival. For every course of action, you must map out not only the intended consequence, but every possible unintended consequence. You must think 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of the present moment. This is the ultimate expression of virtù against fortuna, of strategic skill against the chaos of chance. The reactive man is a victim of fortune, a cork tossed on the waves of circumstance. The predictive man, the man who lives within his walls of foresight, sees the storm gathering on the horizon. He does not pray for it to pass. He is not surprised when it strikes. He has already reinforced the battlements, secured the supplies, and calculated the precise moment to use the storm's own energy to his advantage. This, then, is the fortress of the mind. Its architecture is an act of supreme realism. It is built from the raw material of the world as it is, not as we wish it to be. Its foundations are sunk deep into the bedrock of human nature, respecting its immutable laws. And its walls are high, not to hide from the world, but to command a view of its future. It is a lonely place, this citadel. From its ramparts, the comforting illusions of the world below look small and distant, but it is the only place from which one can truly govern, rather than be governed. It is the only structure that can withstand the relentless siege of reality. You have learned to see the world as it is, to forge the instruments of an unforgiving reality, and to construct a fortress within your own mind. Now, before we reveal how this mental architecture becomes a dynastic power, ensure you are subscribed. For the final wisdom is reserved not for the student who listens, but for the sovereign who is preparing to act. The greatest structure is but a monument if it lacks a ruler. The time has come to seize the throne. This is the final internal campaign. Within the kingdom of your mind, there has long been a civil war. The old monarchy of emotion, impulsive, sentimental, and erratic, has been besieged. It has been isolated within the walls of your new fortress, its power curtailed, its counsel ignored. But it still lives. It whispers from the dungeons of your subconscious. It stages minor rebellions in moments of high stress or unexpected sentiment. It remains a pretender to the throne, a source of potential instability. A fortress divided against itself cannot stand. The regime of logic cannot be established through a negotiated peace. It must be established through a coup d'état. This is the coup against emotion. It is not an act of eradication. To kill emotion is to become a machine, and a machine cannot understand or manipulate the passions that drive mankind. No, the coup is not an execution. It is a permanent subjugation. It is the moment when reason ceases to be a valued advisor to the ruling emotion and becomes the absolute sovereign. From this moment forward, emotion is no longer consulted on matters of state. It is interrogated for intelligence. Fear is no longer a guide. It is a scout, bringing you information about perceived threats, which you will then analyze with cold detachment. Anger is not a call to action. It is a signal that one of your expectations has been violated, prompting a rational inquiry into whether the expectation was flawed or the violation requires a calculated response. Love is not a reason to trust. It is a data point about a powerful vulnerability in yourself and in others, a bond that can be exploited by your enemies or leveraged as a tool of influence. This seizure of power must be decisive. Machiavelli advises that a new ruler must inflict all the necessary injuries at once, so that, by not repeating them every day, he can reassure men and win them over by benefiting them. The same applies to your internal state. You must commit to this new order with a single brutal act of will. You depose the old ways of thinking entirely. The sentimental hesitation, the pangs of conventional morality, the desire for approval, these are the old monarch's loyal courtiers. They must be purged. You do not taper off your reliance on them. You declare them traitors to the new state. This coup is a declaration that the governance of your mind will henceforth be an autocracy of logic. The whispers from the dungeon may continue, but they will never again reach the throne room. The throne has been taken. The sovereign, reason, is crowned. But victory is not the same as security. The history of power is a history of victorious usurpers who grew complacent and were, in turn, deposed. The most critical phase is now consolidation. This is the establishment of the new regime's institutions, the creation of a system so robust that the rule of logic becomes permanent, self-perpetuating, and immune to insurrection. The true mark of a prince is not how he wins power, but how he keeps it. The first institution of your new mental state is the ministry of incessant training. Your mind is now an army, and reason is its general. But as Machiavelli warns, an army that does not train in times of peace will be annihilated in times of war. And for the strategist, it is always a time of war. The world is in a constant state of flux. New threats and opportunities emerge with every dawn. To fall into a state of intellectual peace is to invite ruin. You must therefore commit to a regimen of perpetual mental warfare. This is not passive learning. It is active simulation. You read history not for entertainment, but to dissect the anatomy of past victories and failures. You study the moves of contemporary rivals not with jealousy, but with the cold eye of an intelligence analyst, reverse engineering their strategies and cataloging their weaknesses. You must wage war games against yourself. Take your most successful venture, your most stable relationship, your most secure position, and dedicate your intellect to destroying it. How would you do it? What vulnerabilities would you exploit? This ruthless self-antagonism is the ultimate form of training. It forces you to discover your blind spots before your enemies do. It keeps the blade of your mind from ever growing dull. The common man seeks comfort and affirmation. The strategist actively seeks out dissenting opinions and uncomfortable truths, for these are the grindstones that maintain his edge. This is the tireless work of consolidation, transforming logic from a victorious tactic into the ingrained, unthinking discipline of your entire mental army. The second and final institution is the mandate of the enduring state. The goal of the common man is happiness, a fleeting emotional state. The goal of the strategist is not a feeling, but a structure, an estate in the Machiavellian sense. It is the creation of a position, a legacy, a machinery of power that functions with or without you and can withstand the assaults of fortune over time. Every decision must now be filtered through this final, ultimate question. Does this action strengthen the enduring state, or does it serve a temporary personal gratification? This mandate forces a radical shift in your perception of time. You are no longer living for the day, the month, or the year. You are building for the decade, the generation. This may mean forgoing a profitable but reputationally damaging short-term gain. It may mean investing immense resources in a project that will only bear fruit long after you are gone. It means understanding that your personal feelings, your fatigue, your desire for rest, all are subordinate to the health of the state you are building. This is the final and most profound sacrifice. The man gives way to the architect, the person gives way to the prince. You become the first and most dedicated servant of your own creation. So we arrive at the final truth. The development of ice-cold logic is not a journey toward becoming less human. It is a journey toward becoming something more. It is the coronation of the will, the intellect, and the foresight that lies dormant in almost everyone. In a world where most are slaves to their inherited beliefs, their fleeting passions, and the unpredictable whims of fortune, you have chosen a different path. You have demolished the prison of your own sentiment. You have forged the instruments of agency. You have built a fortress of the mind and installed a sovereign upon its throne. You have not banished your humanity, you have mastered it. You have ceased to be a subject in the chaotic kingdom of the world and have become the ruler of the empire of the self. This is the ultimate power, not to command others, but to command oneself with such absolute authority that the world has no choice but to bend to the force of a will so perfectly forged, a mind so coldly, so beautifully, and so terrifyingly clear.